In your history class or even in day-to-day life, Antarctica is almost never a topic of discussion. Despite the rest of the world gaining more coverage, the bottom of the planet isn't a complete wasteland void of action and interest. In fact, Antarctica has a story of its own, often overlooked but very important to the scientific community, and will become increasingly relevant to the world as climate change grows to become more of an issue. With the help of geologists in Antarctica, we have been able to use rocks to determine that the fifth largest continent in the world was once located near the equator over 500 million years ago. For a very long time, it was actually part of the supercontinent of Gondwana, until it began to split up around 150 million years ago. At the time, however, Antarctica was covered in lush and dense forests. 80 million years ago, it began to cool, and by 35 million years ago, it started to resemble the continent we know today, covered in ice. About 3 to 4 million years ago, during the mid-Pliocene epoch, Antarctica underwent a warm period. Much of the ice melted and tundra vegetation started to grow. Despite only rising a few degrees, such a minuscule alteration in temperature changed the continent so much. If we fast forward to the times of human history, we find ourselves in ancient Greece. In 400 BCE, they were among the first to suspect the presence of a southern continent. However, it would be over 2 millennia before Captain James Cook would be the first to cross the Antarctic Circle in 1773. Despite this, he never actually laid eyes on the icy world in close proximity. Come 1820, 3 people from 3 separate expeditions claimed to be the first to spot Antarctica. They were Gottlieb von Bellingshausen from Russia, Edward Brandfield from England, and Nathaniel Palmer from the United States. That's right, we knew about Uranus for 39 years before noticing an entire continent on our planet. Another 20 years later, Antarctica was confirmed a continent by American naval officer Charles Wilkes when he sailed around 15,000 miles of the Antarctic coastline in 1840, thus proving that it was not just a set of islands. In the early 1900s, there was very little human activity in Antarctica. Despite this, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen became the first person to reach the South Pole in 1911. In 1915, the ship of explorer Ernest Shackleton sunk after becoming trapped in Antarctic ice. His crew was rescued on August 30th, 1916. The first woman to visit Antarctica was Norwegian Caroline Mikkelsen in 1935. Scientific research surged in the wake of World War II, and many seasonal and year-round stations were set up by various countries. 50 more research stations were built by scientists from 12 countries from 1957 until 1958 as part of International Geophysical Year. In 1958, Vivian Fuchs of the UK led the first expedition from coast to coast across the continent. Come 1959, Antarctica changed forever. 12 nations gathered to sign the Antarctic Treaty in Washington, D.C. In order to get said countries to sign it, the treaty does not acknowledge or denounce any territorial claims. Currently, 7 nations have claimed territory in Antarctica. Since the continent isn't technically owned by anyone, its legal framework is determined by this treaty. From then on, Antarctica has been administered by meetings between 29 of the 53 nations that have signed the Antarctic Treaty over time. This is how legal framework is established. In October of 1991, the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty was signed, which deals with environmental impact assessment, conservation of plants and animals, waste disposal and management, marine pollution prevention, area protection, and environmental emergencies. Antarctica can only be used for peaceful reasons. It is illegal to test weapons or station military. You are free to conduct scientific investigation in Antarctica. You are free to exchange information and people as long as you cooperate with the UN and international agencies. Antarctica does not recognize or dispute territorial claims. No new claims will be made while the treaty is enforced. It is illegal to detonate nuclear weapons or dispose of radioactive waste in Antarctica. Antarctica is defined as all land and shelves under 60 degrees south. Treaty state observers have access to all areas and may inspect any stations and equipment. All expeditions and usage of military personnel must give notice beforehand. Legal decisions over scientists and observers are made by their home countries. Members of the Antarctic Treaty meet frequently. Members of the Antarctic Treaty will not encourage actions that go against the treaty. Disputes must be settled peacefully or they will be solved by the ICJ. But what if these establishments aren't adhered to? Criminal offenses committed in Antarctica are settled by the criminal's countries of origin. However, Antarctic law and punishment applies to the taking of plants and animals, entering protected areas, pollution, or introducing an alien species. Antarctica was once again changed forever in 1985. A large hole in the ozone layer over the continent was discovered, thus leading to the Montreal Protocol in 1987, which worked to reduce the use of ozone-depleting materials. This actually began a period of environmental awareness surrounding the Antarctic, not isolated solely to the ozone layer issue, but also to climate change. In 2002, regional warming caused large areas of ice shelves to deteriorate. It only took 3 weeks to crumble an ice sheet by the name of Larsen B, which was 12,000 years old at the time. It was the size of Rhode Island. The melting hasn't stopped there. In 2008, a 160 square mile chunk of ice broke off of the Wilkins ice shelf in the western part of the continent. Despite a comparatively short history of ups and downs, Antarctica is at a risk of changing still more. While we don't know what the future for this icy world holds, we do know that it is not set in stone. If we properly preserve the final frontier of planet Earth, we can reverse the damage that seems unstoppable.